He saved a stranger in the storm. What a veteran and his dog received will move you to tears. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It's a tale that will touch your heart, one that's both inspiring and heartwarming. It begins on a cold, windy night, with a storm rolling in from the north, fierce and unrelenting. The air was thick with snowflakes, swirling in every direction as the wind howled through the trees like a wild animal. Visibility was low, and the roads were treacherous. In the midst of this chaos, a man named Jack Mason, a former Army veteran, was making his way home after a long day. He had seen his fair share of storms, both literal and figurative, but tonight felt different. He drove slowly, his truck creaking against the weight of the ice building up on the windshield. Jack was no stranger to adversity. He had served overseas, seen things that haunted him to this day, and now he was just trying to survive in a world that had grown quieter, colder. Beside him, in the passenger seat, was his constant companion, Max, a German shepherd with eyes full of wisdom and loyalty. Max had been his companion through thick and thin, through the darkest nights and the brightest days. As Jack rounded a bend in the road, his headlights flickered, revealing a figure in the distance, barely visible against the backdrop of the storm. A man, stumbling, struggling against the wind, hands raised as if to shield himself from the snow. His steps were uneven, and Jack could see that he was in trouble. Without a second thought, Jack pulled over, throwing the truck into park and opening the door. Max, sensing the urgency, was already on alert, his ears perked and his tail stiff. Jack called out to the man, his voice nearly lost in the storm. The figure turned slowly, and Jack could see the fear in his eyes. It was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s, his face pale, and his coat torn. He was shivering violently, his hands frozen to the core. "Hey, are you all right?" Jack shouted over the wind. The man nodded weakly, but his legs gave way, and he collapsed into the snow. Jack didn't hesitate. He rushed to the man's side, pulling him up with all his strength. Max barked, as if encouraging Jack to keep going. Together, they managed to get the man into the truck, where Jack wrapped him in a blanket and turned on the heater full blast. As they drove slowly to the nearest shelter, Jack could see that the man was still trembling, his lips blue. He needed help, and Jack wasn't about to leave him stranded in the middle of this storm. "My name's Jack," he said, trying to make the man feel comfortable. "What's your name?" The old man, still shivering, managed to whisper, "Sam. Sam Miller." Jack gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, Sam. You're safe now." The road ahead was still treacherous, but Jack drove with purpose, focused on getting them both to safety. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a small, abandoned cabin at the edge of town. It was the only place Jack knew that could offer shelter from the storm. He helped Sam out of the truck and guided him inside, where it was warmer. Max immediately found a spot near the fireplace, lying down as if guarding the house. Sam sat down by the fire, and Jack prepared some hot tea for him. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, there was a sense of calm. As they sat in silence, Sam spoke up, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I didn't think I was going to make it out there." Jack shrugged, his voice soft. "It's nothing. I couldn't just leave you out there." Sam smiled weakly. "You've done more than just save me. You've given me a second chance." Jack looked down at Max, who was resting peacefully beside the fire. "I guess we all need second chances, sometimes." Sam nodded. Maybe this is mine." Little did Jack know, his act of kindness would change both of their lives in ways they could never have imagined. But for now, they were safe, and that was enough. The storm outside had calmed by the time Jack and Sam were inside the small cabin. The wind had settled into a quiet hum, and the snow, which had been falling in thick, heavy flakes just hours before, now drifted gently to the ground. Inside, the fire crackled, its warmth filling the room, but Jack could still feel the chill in his bones from the relentless cold outside. He stood by the hearth, watching as Sam, now wrapped in a blanket, sipped the hot tea Jack had prepared for him. Max, The German shepherd lay near the fire, his eyes half closed, his body relaxed but alert. Jack glanced at his watch. It was late, but the storm had made it difficult to track time. He turned to Sam, who was staring into the flames, his face weary but peaceful. "You should rest," Jack said, his voice gentle. Sam shook his head slowly, his hands still trembling. "I don't know how to repay you," Sam said, his voice shaky. "You've already saved my life." Jack gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You don't need to repay me. I just did what anyone would do." Sam nodded, but Jack could see the depth of gratitude in his eyes. It was clear that this man had been through something much more than just a storm. Jack could sense there was more to Sam's story, and he wondered what kind of life had led him to this point. The silence stretched between them, and Jack felt a pull to know more, to understand the man he had just saved. "How did you end up out there in that storm?" Jack asked, sitting down across from Sam. Sam hesitated for a moment, the weight of his past pressing down on him. Finally, he spoke. "I lost my family a few years ago," he began, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Wife and kids. A car accident. It's something I can't really talk about. After that, I didn't know where I belonged anymore. I kept moving, never staying in one place for too long. Eventually, I ended up here, hoping to find some kind of peace." Jack listened, his heart heavy with sympathy. He had known loss, too. The kind that stayed with you, gnawing at the edges of your soul, leaving scars you could never fully erase. "I'm sorry," Jack said quietly. Sam waved him off, though Jack could see the pain still lingering in his eyes. "It's been a long road, Jack. A long, lonely road. I never thought I'd find a way out of it." Jack leaned forward, his voice sincere. "Sometimes, all it takes is one person, one act of kindness, to change everything." Sam looked at him, his blue eyes searching Jack's face. "You think so?" Jack nodded slowly. "I know so." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Jack could feel a weight lifting from Sam's shoulders, but he also knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. "You're not alone anymore," Jack said finally, his words firm. "You've got a place here, at least for as long as you need it." Sam gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," he said softly. As the night stretched on, Jack and Sam talked more, sharing bits and pieces of their pasts, building a connection that neither of them had expected. In the quiet of the cabin, surrounded by the remnants of the storm, they found a small sense of peace. Sam had been through so much, but Jack could see the spark of hope slowly returning in his eyes. There was something about the night, the storm, and the way they had both found each other in the chaos of it all that felt like fate. By the time they finished talking, the fire had died down to a soft glow, and both men felt a quiet sense of relief. Jack stood up, stretching his stiff muscles. "You should get some rest. I'll keep watch for a bit," he said. Sam nodded, his eyes closing as he sank deeper into the blanket. Jack stood by the fire, staring out the small window into the night. The storm had passed, but something had shifted in him. He had saved a life that night, but he had also been reminded of what it meant to help someone, to offer kindness when the world seemed cold and distant. Max stirred beside him, lifting his head as if sensing Jack's thoughts. Jack smiled at the dog and scratched behind his ears. "Good boy," he murmured. It had been a long time since Jack had felt this kind of connection, this kind of purpose. He had saved a stranger in the storm, but what they both received from that night would change their lives forever. The next morning, the sun broke through the lingering clouds, casting a soft golden light over the snow-covered landscape outside the cabin. Jack awoke to the faint sound of Max's paws scraping across the floorboards as the dog stood up and stretched. He had fallen asleep by the fire, his back stiff from the long hours of the night. But the weight of the storm outside had finally lifted, and there was a quiet calm in the air now. Jack glanced over at Sam, who was still asleep on the cot near the fireplace, his face peaceful for the first time since Jack had found him in the storm. The warmth from the fire had settled in his bones, and there was something different about him this morning. Sam wasn't just the same man who had stumbled into the storm the night before. He was someone who had been given a chance to start anew. Jack stood, carefully avoiding waking Sam, and walked to the window. Outside, the world was transformed. The snow had stopped falling, and the streets that had once been covered in a thick blanket of white were now dusted with a light layer of snow, making everything appear clean and fresh. The storm had come and gone, but the aftermath was peaceful. He turned back to Sam, who was now stirring, stretching, and rubbing his eyes. "Morning," Jack said quietly, not wanting to disturb the peace. Sam smiled, the first real smile Jack had seen from him since they had met. "Good morning," he replied, his voice hoarse but warmer than before. "Feels like a new day." Jack nodded. "It is. You're safe now." Sam sat up slowly, taking in his surroundings. He seemed hesitant, as if still unsure whether this was real. "I don't know how to thank you, Jack," Sam said, his voice soft, almost as if he didn't fully believe the kindness he had been shown. Jack shrugged, his expression humble. "You don't have to thank me. You were in trouble, and I just did what anyone would have done." Sam met his gaze, his eyes searching Jack's face for some kind of reassurance. "I don't know if anyone would have done what you did," he said quietly. "Most people would have just passed by." Jack shook his head. "I don't think so. You're a person, and people help each other. That's how it's supposed to be." Sam took a deep breath and nodded slowly, as if trying to let the words sink in. He glanced around the cabin, his eyes landing on Max, who was now sitting near the fire, staring at them with his amber eyes. "I've had a lot of time to think about things," Sam began, his voice quieter now. "I've lost so much, and I kept telling myself that there was no point in holding on to anything. No point in trying to rebuild." Jack listened intently, sensing that Sam was about to share something important. "But now," Sam continued, his voice shaky, "I feel like I've been given another chance. Another chance to make things right." Jack's heart went out to him. He knew all too well what it felt like to be broken, to feel like there was no way out. He had been there himself, but over time, he had learned that healing wasn't something you could do alone. It was something that required others, friends, family, or even a stranger. "You're not alone anymore," Jack said, his words firm. "You've got a place here. You've got time to figure things out." Sam looked up at him, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted. Jack smiled gently. "That's okay. You don't have to know everything right now. One step at a time." Sam nodded, his shoulders relaxing as if a weight had been lifted. Jack could see it now, the spark of hope in Sam's eyes. It wasn't much yet, but it was there. That was all it took to start. Jack stood and stretched, looking at Max. "We've got a day ahead of us," Jack said. "Let's get you settled. The storm's gone, but the world's still waiting for us out there." Sam stood up slowly, his legs a little stiff, but his expression had softened. "I'll do my best," he said quietly, as if the words meant something more than just a promise. Jack nodded, his voice warm. "I know you will." They spent the day cleaning up around the cabin, chopping wood, and getting the place in order. Sam didn't speak much, but Jack could see him thinking, reflecting. The day felt long, but there was something satisfying about it, something that felt like healing. Later, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the snow, Sam approached Jack. "I've been thinking," Sam said, his voice steady now. "I don't have much, but I'd like to offer something in return." Jack looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Sam hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I used to own a piece of land, nothing big, just a small plot with a cabin. It's been abandoned for years, but it's still there, sitting empty. I've got no use for it, but maybe you could." Jack was taken aback, not expecting such an offer. "I don't need anything, Sam," he said, his tone gentle. Sam looked at him, his eyes earnest. "You saved my life. It's the least I can do. You and Max are welcome to it." Jack thought for a moment, considering the gesture. "I don't know if I can take it," Jack said, his voice thoughtful. "But I'll think about it." Sam smiled, a genuine smile this time, and Jack could see the gratitude in it. The storm had brought them together, but it was the kindness and the willingness to help that would shape the rest of their lives. In that moment, Jack realized that sometimes the most unexpected things could change your life forever. The cabin, the storm, the new day ahead, it was all part of a bigger picture. A picture that was still unfolding, and he couldn't wait to see what came next. The following days after the storm felt different, like the world had reset itself in a way. Jack and Sam spent hours working together, restoring the small cabin and preparing the surrounding area for the coming winter. As they chopped firewood and cleaned up the yard, Jack noticed something in Sam's demeanor that hadn't been there before: hope. It was quiet, almost subtle, but it was there. Sam had started talking more, sharing pieces of his past, and Jack could tell that every word was a little easier to say. The land Sam had offered was still a strange thought to Jack, and while he appreciated the gesture, he couldn't bring himself to take it. It felt wrong, as if he was accepting something too valuable for just the simple act of helping a stranger. But Sam insisted, his gratitude clear. "It's the least I can do," Sam would say each time the subject came up. "I have no one left to give it to. It's yours if you want it." Jack couldn't deny that the thought of having a place of his own again was tempting, but there was something about Sam's insistence that made him pause. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack found himself thinking about the offer more deeply. "What's it like, living there?" Jack asked, staring into the flames. Sam looked up from his cup of tea, his eyes softening. "It was peaceful. For a while, at least. My wife and kids used to love it there. It was our escape from everything. A little cabin by a lake. It was perfect." Jack leaned back in his chair, listening carefully. "What happened?" Sam's expression darkened, but he didn't hesitate. "The accident. I thought it would be easier if I just left everything behind. But the truth is, the place never stopped calling me. I just couldn't bring myself to go back. It felt like I was closing a chapter one didn't want to open." Jack could understand that feeling. He had his own scars, his own places he avoided, memories he couldn't face. "But I think it's time," Sam continued, his voice quieter. "I'm tired of running from it. Maybe it's time to let go, or at least give someone else the chance to find peace there." Jack's thoughts raced as he processed Sam's words. He wasn't sure what it was, but something about the idea of that cabin by the lake, a place that had once been filled with life and love, seemed right. It felt like a second chance, not just for Sam, but for him as well. After all the storms they had weathered, both literal and emotional, Jack couldn't help but wonder if this was the next step in both of their journeys. The next day, Jack finally made his decision. He approached Sam, who was outside, fixing the roof of the cabin. "I think I'm ready," Jack said, his voice steady. Sam looked up, a hopeful expression crossing his face. "Ready for what?" Jack smiled. "I'm ready to take you up on your offer. The cabin. I think it's time." Sam stood up, his face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and relief. "Are you sure? I know it's a lot to take on." Jack nodded. "I'm sure. It feels right." Over the next few weeks, they made plans to visit the cabin by the lake. Jack was both excited and nervous. It wasn't just a cabin. It was a place that held memories, both good and painful. He wasn't sure what to expect when they arrived, but as they drove down the winding road leading to the lake, Jack could feel something stirring inside him. The cabin sat by the water, just as Sam had described. The trees surrounding it were tall, their branches swaying gently in the wind. The lake itself was calm, its surface reflecting the clear blue sky above. Jack could hear the faint rustling of the leaves, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of peace. The cabin itself was modest, built from wood that had weathered the seasons but still held up well. The porch was empty, but Jack could imagine Sam and his family sitting there, watching the sun set over the water. As they stepped inside, Jack took in the quiet warmth of the place. The air smelled like pine and old wood, and the sunlight filtered in through the windows, casting soft shadows on the walls. Sam stood by the door, his gaze fixed on the interior as if he were seeing it for the first time in years. "It's just a place," Sam said quietly, almost to himself. "But it's been home." Jack turned to him, his voice soft. "It's a good place, and I think it can be home again." Sam nodded, his eyes glistening with emotion. "I hope so." They spent the rest of the day exploring the land, walking down to the edge of the lake, and talking about what needed to be fixed. It felt like they were both building something new, not just with their hands, but with their hearts. By the time the sun began to set, Jack knew that this place, this cabin by the lake, would be more than just a home. It would be the place where both of them could find the peace they had been searching for. In the quiet of the evening, Jack felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He had helped Sam, but in return, Sam had given him something far greater, a chance at a new beginning. A new life, one where both of them could heal, and one that had the potential to be filled with hope, love, and second chances. The days following their arrival at the cabin were full of quiet work and unexpected discoveries. Jack and Sam spent their mornings cleaning the property and their afternoons repairing what had fallen into disrepair over the years. The cabin, which had once been a place of joy and laughter, had now become a symbol of the healing that both men were undergoing. They worked side by side, their movements syncing as if they had known each other far longer than they actually had. Max, ever the faithful companion, kept a watchful eye over them, always alert, but content. As the days passed, the simple tasks of fixing windows, clearing out debris, and chopping wood became a routine, a calming, meditative rhythm that grounded both Jack and Sam in a way that nothing else could. The weight of their pasts still lingered, but the steady progress they made each day was a quiet promise that things could get better. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the lake, Sam spoke up. His voice was soft, almost hesitant, as if testing the waters before diving into something deeper. "I used to think that running away was the only way to survive," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But now, I'm starting to think that maybe staying, facing the past, is the only way to truly heal." Jack nodded, his own thoughts mirroring Sam's. He had run, too. He had left behind the military, left behind the trauma, but it was always with him. Running never worked. The only thing that worked, he had learned, was confronting it head-on. "I get that," Jack said quietly. "I've been there. And you're right. Healing doesn't happen by running away. It happens by facing it, little by little." Sam looked at Jack, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "I think I've been afraid of that for a long time. Afraid of facing what I've lost." Jack understood. Loss was something that never truly went away. It just became part of you. But with time, it could become something different, something bearable. "I think the most important thing is to not face it alone," Jack said. "You've got me, Sam. And Max." Sam's smile widened, and he nodded, his eyes glistening with unspoken gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply. "You don't know how much that means." The next morning, after breakfast, Jack and Sam went for a walk around the property. The land was vast, stretching out toward the distant tree line, and it was peaceful. The quiet was almost tangible, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze. They walked for hours, talking about everything and nothing, about life before the storm, about their hopes for the future, about the people they had been and the people they were becoming. By the time they returned to the cabin, Jack had a thought that he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. This place, this cabin by the lake, wasn't just a home for Sam. It was a home for him, too. In a way, it felt like they had both found their place in the world, somewhere to heal and grow. Over the following weeks, Sam began to make the cabin his own again. He planted a small garden in the yard, trimmed the hedges, and even started building a small deck by the water. Jack helped where he could, but it was clear that this was something Sam needed to do on his own. It was a way of reclaiming his life, of transforming the past into something that could be a foundation for the future. The mornings were spent working, the afternoons in quiet reflection, and the evenings, those were for stories. Jack shared stories of his time in the military, of the places he had seen, and the people he had met. Sam, in turn, told stories of his family, the days when the cabin had been filled with laughter, the summer nights spent around a bonfire with his wife and kids. Those stories, both joyful and painful, began to fill the space between them, creating a bond that neither had expected. One evening, after a particularly long day of working on the deck, Jack sat on the porch, Max at his side. Sam came out a few moments later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to Jack and sat down next to him. "You ever think about what comes next?" Sam asked, his voice low but steady. Jack took a sip of his coffee, letting the warmth seep into his bones. "All the time," he said honestly. "But the thing is, I think for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with not knowing. I think we're both figuring it out, one day at a time." Sam smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "One day at a time," he repeated, savoring the words. "I can live with that." As the days turned into weeks, both men found peace in their routines. The land, the cabin, and the small acts of kindness they shared with each other became the foundation for a new chapter in both of their lives. The storms, both external and internal, had passed, and they had weathered them together. But now, as the days grew warmer and the trees began to bloom, they had something more: hope. Jack had never expected to find a new life, a new purpose. But here, by this quiet lake, that's exactly what he had found. And Sam, for the first time in years, began to believe that he could, too. As spring slowly crept across the land, bringing warmth and new life to the world around them, Jack and Sam continued their quiet work at the cabin. The days were becoming longer, and with the rising sun, there was a sense of renewal in the air. For the first time in years, Jack felt like he had a purpose again. The land was coming to life, and so was he. Sam, too, had started to transform. The quiet and steady rhythm of life at the cabin had done wonders for him. Each day, he grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. His eyes, which had once been clouded with sadness, now sparkled with hope and a quiet determination. He had found a new connection to the land, a sense of peace that came from working with his hands and tending to the earth that had once felt like a distant memory. Jack watched Sam from across the yard one afternoon as he worked on the garden, pulling weeds from the soil with a focused determination. It was clear that this place was healing him, just as it had begun to heal Jack. The cabin, the land, and the work they did together were becoming more than just tasks. They were a foundation for something greater, a new life that was slowly taking shape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sam came over to Jack, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "I think I'm ready," Sam said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of excitement. Jack raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "Ready for what?" "To rebuild," Sam replied, his gaze looking out over the land. "Not just the cabin, but everything. I've been thinking about what you said, about not running anymore. I think it's time I stopped letting the past hold me back." Jack could see the resolve in Sam's eyes. "That's a big step," he said quietly. Sam nodded. "It's the only step I can take." The following weeks were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Sam began taking on larger projects around the cabin, repairing the roof, fixing the old stone chimney, and even adding a new fence around the garden. Jack helped where he could, but he could see that this was something Sam had to do on his own. He needed to prove to himself that he could build again, that he could create something from the ashes of his past. Jack found himself deeply moved by the transformation. He had never imagined that helping a stranger in a storm would lead to this, a partnership, a brotherhood, a chance at rebuilding not just a cabin, but their lives. One afternoon, while working together to clear out a nearby patch of forest for a new garden, Sam stopped suddenly, looking out over the trees with a thoughtful expression. "I never realized how much this place could mean to me," Sam said softly, his voice full of emotion. "I thought I was just fixing up an old cabin, but now, it's like I'm fixing myself too." Jack paused and looked at him, the weight of Sam's words settling over him. "You're doing more than fixing yourself, Sam," Jack said, his voice quiet but full of conviction. "You're finding yourself. You're building something that's yours. You've got something to live for now, and that's more than anyone can ask for." Sam smiled, his face softening as he looked at Jack. "Thanks, Jack. I don't think I would have ever gotten here without you. You showed me that I wasn't too far gone, that it was okay to rebuild." Jack smiled back, though his heart ached with the truth of those words. He, too, had been lost once, and finding his way back had been a long, hard journey. But now, with Sam, Max, and this cabin, he felt like he had found his place again. "I didn't do anything," Jack said, his voice gentle. "You did it all. You're the one who's been building, who's been healing. I just gave you a little push when you needed it." As the weeks passed, the transformation of the cabin was mirrored in the transformation of both men. The garden was thriving, the cabin was stronger than it had been in years, and the land felt alive with new energy. The work was hard, but it was fulfilling. Every day, they made a little more progress, and with each step forward, the weight of the past seemed to lift just a little more. But the most important change wasn't the cabin or the land. It was Sam himself. He was no longer the broken man who had stumbled into Jack's life during the storm. He was a man who had found his strength again, who had learned that it was possible to rise from the ashes of his past and build a future. One evening, as the last light of day faded into dusk, Sam came to Jack with a small box in his hands. Jack looked at him curiously. "What's that?" he asked. Sam smiled, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "I've been working on something," he said, holding out the box. Jack took it from him and opened it carefully. Inside was a small, hand-carved wooden figurine of a cabin, intricately detailed, with tiny windows and a roof made of tiny slats of wood. Jack's heart skipped a beat. "You made this?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Sam nodded, his smile widening. "I wanted to give you something. You've helped me rebuild my life, Jack." You've given me something I thought I lost forever. Jack stared at the figurine, overwhelmed by the gesture. Thank you, Sam, he said, his voice hoarse. This means more than you'll ever know. Sam placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, his eyes filled with gratitude. We've both come a long way, Sam said softly. But we wouldn't have made it without each other. Jack nodded, his heart full. You're right. We're in this together. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, Jack and Sam sat side by side, watching the night sky. For the first time in a long time, both men felt at peace. The storm had passed, but the journey they had taken together had only just begun. As summer slowly gave way to fall, the cabin had truly transformed. The garden Sam had started was flourishing, bursting with vibrant colors and fresh produce. The small wooden fence around it was sturdy, a symbol of the effort both men had put into making this place their own. Jack could see the pride in Sam's eyes every time he looked at the garden or the cabin they had worked on together. It was no longer just a place, it was home. Jack, too, had found a deep sense of belonging here. There was something about the land, the simplicity of life, that allowed him to finally take a breath and let go of the tension he had carried for so long. The past was still there, lurking in the corners of his mind, but for the first time, it didn't have a grip on him. As he worked alongside Sam, fixing the old stone wall that lined the edge of the property, he realized that he had begun to heal in ways he hadn't thought possible. One chilly evening, as they sat by the fire with Max lying at their feet, Sam turned to Jack, his face thoughtful. You ever think about what happens next? He asked quietly. Jack didn't answer right away, instead taking a deep breath as he stared into the flames. It was a question he had asked himself countless times. What came after this? After the healing, after the rebuilding? What was left to do? I think about it, Jack said finally, his voice steady. But the truth is, I don't know. All I know is that right now, this feels right. This place, this life, it feels like something we're supposed to be doing. Sam nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Yeah, I get that. For a long time, I thought I was just waiting for something to happen. Like there was some big moment where everything would click. But I think this is the moment. It's right here. Jack smiled back at him, the firelight flickering in his eyes. Yeah, we're living it right now. The next morning, after breakfast, Sam grabbed his jacket and turned to Jack. I'm going to head into town today. Thought I'd get some supplies and maybe take a look at that old barn we talked about fixing up. You want to come? Jack thought for a moment. The idea of going into town, seeing people again, was appealing. But there was also something about being at the cabin, in this peaceful solitude, that he had grown to appreciate. He shook his head. I think I'll stay here. Work on the porch a little. Maybe chop some wood. Sam grinned, clearly enjoying the newfound peace they both had. Suit yourself. I'll be back by evening. The day passed slowly for Jack. It was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt comforting rather than lonely. He worked on the porch, sanding the wood and fixing the railings. Every now and then, he would pause and look out at the land, taking in the vast expanse of trees and the lake shimmering in the distance. It was hard to believe that just a few months ago, this place had felt like an escape, a place he never thought he would call home. Now it was different. It was where he belonged. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the landscape, Jack heard the sound of a truck approaching. He turned just as Sam pulled up, the truck kicking up dust as it came to a stop in front of the cabin. Sam stepped out, a bag of supplies in one hand and a wide grin on his face. You wouldn't believe what I found, Sam said, walking toward Jack with a bounce in his step. Jack raised an eyebrow. What did you find? Sam's grin grew even wider. A letter. From my wife. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Sam had never really talked much about his wife, not in detail anyway. Jack knew that her death had been a heavy blow, one that Sam had carried with him for years. A letter? Jack asked, his voice soft. Sam nodded, his eyes misting over with emotion. Yeah. It was tucked away in a box at the back of the store, under some old books. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but when I opened it, there it was, her handwriting. Sam paused, swallowing hard. She wrote it the last summer we spent here. Before everything changed. Before the accident. Jack's chest tightened as he watched. Sam carefully, unsure of what to say. What did she say? He asked gently. Sam's voice shook slightly as he read the letter aloud. I don't know if you'll ever see this, but if you do, I want you to know that I love you. And I believe in you. I believe in us. We've built something here, Sam. Something that can never be taken away. The love we have is ours, no matter what happens. Sam stopped reading, his eyes glistening with tears. She knew. She knew I would need to hear that one day. She believed in me. Jack stepped closer, placing a hand on Sam's shoulder. She knew. And she left this for you. For this moment, right here. Sam nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I don't know if I've ever felt this, connected to her. I've carried the pain of losing her for so long. But now, I feel like she's still with me. Still part of this place, part of what we're building. Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. She is. And so are you, Sam. You're not alone. Sam smiled, the weight of his grief finally seeming to lift. I'm not alone anymore, he said softly. I've got this place. And I've got you, Jack. Jack smiled back, feeling the warmth of Sam's words settle into his chest. It wasn't just the cabin that had been rebuilt, it was Sam, too. And for the first time in years, Jack felt the future stretch out before him, filled with possibility. Together, they had built something worth holding on to, a foundation strong enough to weather whatever storms lay ahead. As the days turned into weeks, Jack and Sam found themselves more and more at peace with the life they had built together. The cabin by the lake was no longer just a place to rest. It had become a home in the truest sense of the word. Every corner, every nail they hammered in, felt like a piece of their hearts settling into place. The small garden Sam had planted flourished, and the land around the cabin began to show signs of life once again. Jack found himself waking up each morning with a sense of purpose, a deep satisfaction in the work they were doing, and a quiet hope for the future. It was during this time that Jack began to realize just how far they had come, not just with the cabin or the land, but with themselves. Sam had changed, and so had he. They were no longer two strangers brought together by a storm. They were friends, brothers in arms, bound by the shared experience of rebuilding their lives from the ground up. Sam, in particular, had found a sense of peace that Jack had never thought possible for him. The pain of losing his family, of the accident that had shattered his life, still lingered, but it was no longer an overwhelming weight. He had begun to make peace with his past, to accept the love and the memories of his wife and children, without letting them define his entire existence. One afternoon, as they worked on the porch, Jack paused and looked over at Sam. You doing okay? He asked, noticing that Sam had been quiet for a while. Sam smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Yeah, he said. I'm more than okay, actually. I'm happy. I never thought I'd say that again. Jack felt a warmth spread through him at Sam's words. He hadn't realized how much he had hoped for this moment until it was here. I'm glad, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. You deserve to be. Sam looked out over the lake, his gaze distant. You know, I never thought I could be at peace with all that's happened. But I think I'm finally starting to accept it. Not just what I lost, but what I still have. Jack's heart swelled at the honesty in Sam's voice. And what's that? Sam turned to him, his face soft. This, he said, gesturing to the cabin, the land, and Max, who was lounging lazily at their feet. You. This place. A second chance. Jack's throat tightened as he realized just how much Sam's words meant. In the silence that followed, both men stood there, side by side, taking in the view. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the lake, and for a moment, everything felt still, as if the world had paused just for them. The past was behind them now, and the future was uncertain, but in this moment, they had everything they needed. As the days continued to pass, Jack found himself thinking about the next chapter in their lives. He had come to the cabin to escape, to find peace, but what he had found was something far greater, a new purpose. He thought about the land Sam had offered him, the cabin, and the idea of building something new. Maybe this was the place where both of them could finally put down roots. Sam had already begun to dream again, and now, Jack was starting to imagine a future that wasn't just about surviving, but living. One evening, as they sat around the fire after a long day's work, Jack turned to Sam. I've been thinking, he said, about the cabin and the land. About what's next. Sam looked up from his tea, curious. What about it? I think I want to make this our home, Jack said, his voice steady. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this place. I know you, and I want to be here, with you. I think we could do something great here. Sam's eyes lit up with a mixture of surprise and joy. You mean it? Jack nodded. Yeah, I do. Sam smiled, his grin wide. Well, in that case, I think it's time we started planning. This place has potential. We've got work to do, but we've got the time to do it. Jack laughed, the sound echoing through the cabin. We sure do. Over the next few months, the cabin began to take shape in ways neither of them had imagined. They started to build not just a home, but a life. Jack focused on expanding the garden, while Sam tackled the larger projects, like restoring the barn and adding a small guest house. Max, ever the loyal companion, was always by their side, his tail wagging with excitement every time they made progress. The land, once quiet and empty, was now alive with the energy of their work and their dreams. It wasn't easy, of course. There were setbacks, broken tools, bad weather, and days when they both felt exhausted. But those moments were fleeting. They were always followed by the satisfaction of seeing something new take shape, of knowing that every effort was bringing them closer to something meaningful. As the seasons changed, so did they. Jack and Sam had come so far from the men they once were, and they were finally starting to see the fruits of their labor. One crisp autumn evening, as they sat on the porch watching the leaves change color, Sam turned to Jack. You ever think about what we've done here? He asked. Jack looked out over the land, taking in the cabin, the garden, the barn, and the guest house they had built. Yeah, he said softly. It's more than I ever thought it would be. But it's not just the work. It's the fact that we did it together. Sam nodded, his eyes shining with appreciation. We did. And in that moment, Jack realized that the real reward had never been about what they built. It had been about the journey they had taken to get here and the friendship they had forged along the way. As winter slowly began to settle in, Jack and Sam found themselves reflecting on how far they had come. The cabin, once a mere structure of wood and stone, had transformed into a place of warmth and belonging. The hard work, the long days of labor, and the quiet moments shared between them had turned it into a home, something neither of them had thought possible when they first met. The landscape around the cabin had changed, too. What was once an empty, desolate stretch of land was now alive with growth. The garden Sam had nurtured was filled with vegetables that would help them through the winter months, and the barn they had restored stood strong, ready to hold whatever the future might bring. The guest house, though still a work in progress, was a symbol of their shared dreams. Jack had started to imagine the future in a way he hadn't allowed himself before. This place, with all its imperfections, was home. He had never expected to feel so settled again. Sam, too, had changed. The man who had arrived at the cabin broken and lost had become someone who was beginning to see the possibility of a future. He was more than just a survivor now. He was a man who had found purpose again. The healing process was slow, but it was real. And as winter crept in, it seemed as if the snow itself was covering up the scars of the past, leaving behind only what was important: the present, the work, and the bond they had formed. One crisp morning, as the frost lingered on the edges of the windows and the first light of day began to filter through the trees, Jack and Sam sat down at the kitchen table. Over a hot cup of coffee, Max lay contentedly by the fire, his head resting on his paws. The silence was comfortable, the kind that only comes when you've spent enough time with someone to truly understand them. Sam looked out the window, his gaze distant. You ever think about what happens next? Sam asked, breaking the silence. Jack glanced over at him, his brow furrowing slightly. What do you mean? I don't know, Sam said, his voice thoughtful. We've built this place. We've made it our own. But I'm not sure what comes after. Jack set his mug down and leaned back in his chair, considering the question. He had been thinking about it, too. What came next after everything they had worked for? What was the next step after healing, after rebuilding? I think, Jack said slowly, what comes next is up to us. We've got a good life here, Sam. We've made something out of nothing, and we can keep building it. But it's not just about the land or the cabin. It's about what we want to do with the time we have left. Sam nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I never thought I'd have the chance to think about what comes next, he said quietly. After everything I lost, I thought my life was over. But now, I don't know. I guess I'm just figuring it out. Jack smiled, his eyes warm. That's okay. We don't have to have it all figured out. We've got time. And we've got each other. Sam met his gaze, his expression softening. Yeah, he said, his voice steady. We've got each other. The days passed, and as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, Jack and Sam made plans for the future. They would continue to build on what they had started, not just the cabin, but the life they were creating together. There was still work to be done, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a chance. Jack had never imagined he would find this sense of peace, this sense of purpose, in such an unexpected place. But here, with Sam and Max, in this little cabin by the lake, he had found something more valuable than anything he had ever sought. A sense of home. And as the cold winds of winter howled outside, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The storms had come and gone, but the bond they shared was strong. It had weathered the hardest of times, and it would continue to do so, because the one thing they had learned from all of this was that home wasn't just a place. It was the people you shared it with, and the strength you found in each other. Sam stood up from the table and stretched, his face breaking into a smile. "I think I'll go for a walk," he said, glancing out the window at the blanket of snow covering the ground. "Clear my head a bit." Jack nodded, standing up as well. "I'll join you. Let's see what the winter's got in store for us." Together, they walked out into the crisp air, their footprints leaving marks in the fresh snow. Max trotted along beside them, his tail wagging with each step. The world was quiet, the only sound the crunch of their boots in the snow. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt just right. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the future held. But they had each other, and in that, they had everything they needed. The cabin, the land, and the journey they were on. It was all part of the new beginning they had built together. And for the first time, Jack truly believed that no matter what came next, they would be ready for it. Winter had fully taken hold of the land. The trees now bare, their skeletal branches swaying gently in the cold wind. Jack and Sam had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. They spent their days maintaining the cabin, preparing for the harsher months ahead, and, when time allowed, reflecting on everything they had built. The cabin, the garden, and the surrounding land were no longer just projects. They were symbols of a new beginning. Sam, once a man who had lost everything, had started to believe again in what could be built, not just with wood and nails, but with time, effort, and hope. Jack, too, had found something in these months that he hadn't thought possible: peace. It wasn't just the work or the quiet that filled the space between them. It was the bond that had formed, the understanding that no matter what came, they could face it together. One evening, after a particularly cold day of repairing the roof, Sam stood by the fire, staring into the flames, his face illuminated by the orange glow. Jack looked up from his workbench and noticed the change in his friend's demeanor. Sam had been quiet for most of the day, more so than usual. "You okay?" Jack asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Sam blinked and turned toward Jack, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, just thinking." Jack put down the tool he was holding and walked over, his boots creaking on the wooden floor. "What about?" Sam hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "I guess I'm just realizing how much has changed. Not just the cabin or the land, but me. I've started to feel like I'm not just surviving anymore. Like maybe I'm actually living again." Jack nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Sam's words. "You've come a long way, Sam. I've seen it. You're not the same man who stumbled into that storm." Sam's expression softened, and he looked down at the floor for a moment before meeting Jack's eyes again. "I never thought I could find peace, you know? After everything that happened, it felt like I was just waiting for the end. But now, I don't know. It's like I'm finally starting to believe in something again. Something that isn't just the past." Jack smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. "That's what happens when you let go of the past. You start to see the future. And you've got a good one ahead of you, Sam. You've worked hard for it." Sam's smile widened, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the fire. "And so have you, Jack. I know I've thanked you before, but I don't think I'll ever have the words for what you've done. You didn't just save me from the storm that day. You helped me save myself." Jack's throat tightened, his own emotions welling up. "We've both saved each other, Sam. That's how it works. We all need someone to help us find our way." The room fell into a comfortable silence as the fire crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind howled, but inside the cabin, everything was calm. Max lay curled up by the hearth, his eyes half closed, content in the warmth of the room. Sam turned back to the fire, lost in thought. I think it's time for me to let go of the guilt," he said, his voice low but firm. I've been carrying it for so long, thinking I didn't deserve to move on. But now, I see that I do. And I'm ready to start living again, not for the past, but for what's in front of me. Jack stood still for a moment, the weight of Sam's words settling in. You've been carrying it alone for too long, Jack said quietly. But you don't have to anymore. You've got this place, and you've got me. And that's not just a house and a friendship. It's a new beginning. Sam smiled, his face lighter than Jack had ever seen it before. I know, he said softly. And I'm grateful. I never thought I'd have something like this again. Jack could see the relief in Sam's eyes, the way the weight seemed to lift off his shoulders. It wasn't just the cabin or the land. It was the freedom to start fresh, to finally put the past behind him. You've earned it, Sam, Jack said, his voice steady. You've worked for it, and now you've got the life you deserve. Sam looked down at the fire again, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm proud of what we've done here. I'm proud of what we've built. Jack nodded, his gaze fixed on the flames as well. Me too. The winter days grew shorter, the nights colder, but Jack and Sam never wavered in their commitment to each other and the life they had created. They spent their days working, planning, and dreaming of the future, always side by side. They had come so far from the days of uncertainty and fear, and now, with every passing day, the world outside seemed a little brighter, a little more hopeful. One snowy afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Jack paused to look at Sam. You know, Jack said, a smile tugging at his lips, I think we've made something really special here. Sam wiped his brow and turned to Jack, his face flushed with the effort of their work. Yeah, he agreed. We've made a home. And that's more than I ever thought I'd have again. Jack nodded, feeling a sense of contentment settle over him. It's more than either of us thought we'd have, but it's ours. Together. As the snow continued to fall softly around them, they stood there for a moment, taking in the beauty of their creation, the cabin, the land, and the bond that had grown between them. They didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it together, side by side, with hope in their hearts and strength in their spirits. As the first signs of spring began to emerge, Jack and Sam stood at the edge of the land they had worked so hard to shape. The snow had finally begun to melt, revealing patches of earth that had been hidden under the white blanket of winter for months. The air was still crisp, but there was a warmth to it now, a promise of new beginnings. The trees, once bare, were beginning to bud with new life, and the faint scent of pine and fresh soil filled the air. The cabin, which had once seemed so isolated and foreign, now felt like a true home, a place of belonging and peace. Jack leaned against the porch railing, watching the land come alive, and felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. It had been a long road, full of challenges and hard work, but he had finally found a place where he could be at peace, a place where the ghosts of his past could finally rest. Sam came up beside him, his boots crunching in the newly thawed ground. You ever think about how much we've changed? Sam asked, his voice thoughtful. Jack looked over at him, noticing the change in Sam's demeanor. There was no longer the same weight of sadness in his eyes. He had found a peace that Jack hadn't thought was possible for him. Yeah, Jack said, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I think about it all the time. We've come a long way. Sam nodded, his gaze softening as he took in the view of the cabin and the surrounding land. I never thought this place could mean so much, Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. When I first came here, I was just looking for a way out, a place to hide. But now, I think this place has given me something I never thought I could have again, hope. Jack's heart swelled at Sam's words. The man standing beside him was not the same person who had stumbled into that storm, lost and broken. He had rebuilt himself, just as they had rebuilt the cabin, brick by brick. You've done more than just survive, Sam, Jack said softly. You've built a new life. You've created something here. Sam looked at him, a grateful smile crossing his face. I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You showed me that it was okay to start over, that it wasn't too late for me. Jack clapped him on the shoulder, the bond between them stronger than ever. We did it together, he said simply. Sam looked out over the land, his eyes distant for a moment, as if lost in thought. I think about my family sometimes, he said quietly. The way it used to be, but I don't feel the same weight anymore. It's like I'm finally starting to let go, and not because I want to forget them, but because I know that they would want me to live again. To be happy. Jack didn't know what to say. There were no words to make the kind of loss Sam had experienced easier. But he knew that Sam had made peace with it in his own way, and that was all that mattered. They would be proud of you, Sam, Jack said, his voice steady. You've built something that would make them proud. Sam smiled, the weight of his grief lifting a little more with each passing day. I think I'm finally starting to believe that. As the days grew longer and the warmth of spring began to settle in, Jack and Sam found themselves planning for the future. They had always known they would continue to work the land, but now, they were thinking bigger. They had built a home, yes, but what came next? What could they do with the land that surrounded them, with all the possibilities it held? Sam had always dreamed of opening a small business, something to bring in extra income and provide a sense of purpose. What do you think about starting a farm stand? Sam asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Something simple, but with the vegetables we've grown, maybe some homemade jams, eggs from the chickens. Jack considered it for a moment. I like it. It would give us a chance to connect with the community. Maybe even help people see what we've built here. Sam's face brightened. Exactly. It's not just about the land. It's about sharing it with others. We've got something good here. Why not share it? Jack nodded. Let's do it. We've worked hard for this, and now it's time to give something back. The next few months were filled with excitement and new challenges. Jack and Sam expanded the garden, adding more rows of vegetables and building a small barn for the animals they planned to raise. They began gathering the supplies they would need for their farm stand, building displays and signage. As the summer months rolled in, they were ready to open their little stand by the roadside. It wasn't much at first, just a small table with baskets of fresh produce, jars of jam, and eggs from their chickens. But the community took notice. People from the nearby town came to buy their goods, to see the transformation that had taken place, and to support the two men who had turned an old cabin into something new. The farm stand became a success, and with each passing week, Jack and Sam found themselves not only providing for themselves, but also building connections with the people around them. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the community, the shared experiences, and the way they had built something together, not just for themselves but for others. As the seasons changed, so did their business. What had started as a small farm stand grew into something bigger, and the two men began to dream of expanding even further, maybe adding a small shop or hosting events on the land. But no matter what came next, they knew one thing for sure. They had built a life together, a life that was more than just about survival. It was about thriving. It was about hope. And it was about the future they had created, not just for themselves, but for everyone who stepped onto their land. With each new challenge and each new step forward, Jack and Sam knew that they had finally found their place in the world, and they were ready for whatever came next. As autumn settled over the land, Jack and Sam found themselves standing at the crossroads of another new chapter. Their little farm stand had grown into something that exceeded their expectations. What had started as a simple table by the side of the road was now a bustling hub for locals and travelers alike. They had expanded their offerings to include fresh honey, homemade bread, and even some handmade crafts, all items that had become a labor of love. The farm stand had transformed from just a way to make a living into a place of connection. People came for the fresh produce, of course, but they also came for the warmth and the sense of community that Jack and Sam had created. It wasn't just about selling food. It was about building relationships, sharing stories, and offering something that felt real. Jack found himself looking forward to the days when they opened the stand, when he could talk to the regulars and hear about their lives. Sam, too, had found a renewed sense of purpose in the work. The same man who had once felt lost in the world now had a purpose that extended beyond the cabin and the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. But as they both knew, the road they had traveled had not always been easy. There had been days of doubt, days when they questioned whether this life was really the one they had been meant to build. But those days were fewer now, and the weight of the past seemed lighter with each passing day. One crisp morning, as they prepared for another day of work at the stand, Sam stood by the porch, looking out over the land. Jack came up beside him, wiping his hands on his pants after hauling a few baskets of apples to the truck. "You okay?" Jack asked, noticing the faraway look in Sam's eyes. Sam didn't answer right away, instead taking a long, deep breath of the cool autumn air. He turned to Jack with a smile, but there was a quiet sadness behind his eyes. I was just thinking about how far we've come, Sam said, his voice calm but filled with reflection. A few years ago, I thought I'd never find peace. I thought the world had forgotten me, and I had nothing left to give. But now, standing here, I realize that I've been given more than I ever thought possible. A second chance, a purpose, a place to belong. Jack clapped him on the back, feeling the weight of his words. You've earned every bit of it, Sam. You've worked harder than anyone I know. This place, this life, it's yours just as much as it is mine. Sam's eyes softened, and he glanced around at the farm. It's more than just a place. It's everything. It's what I never thought I could have again. Jack nodded. And we've got a lot more ahead of us. There's still so much we can do here. Sam smiled, the weight on his shoulders lifting just a little more. I think I'm ready for whatever comes next, he said. Jack smiled back, knowing that whatever the future held, they were ready for it. The next few weeks were filled with small, steady changes. The farm stand had become a staple of the community, and people from neighboring towns were starting to visit. Jack and Sam began discussing the possibility of opening a small storefront in town, one where they could offer their homemade goods year-round, not just during the growing seasons. It was an exciting idea, one that both men embraced with enthusiasm. But they didn't rush into it. Instead, they took their time, focusing on what mattered most, building the foundation for something that would last. One evening, as they sat by the fire, discussing the future, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Jack stood up, surprised, but Sam was already on his feet. I'll get it, he said, heading toward the door. When he opened it, a man in his mid-40s stood outside, looking a bit lost. Can I help you? Sam asked, his tone warm but cautious. The man stepped forward, holding a letter in his hand. I'm looking for Sam Miller, he said. Sam's heart skipped a beat. That's me, he said, his voice suddenly tense. The man handed him the letter. This is for you, he said simply, before turning and walking away without another word. Sam stared at the letter in his hands, his fingers trembling slightly. Jack stepped up beside him, noticing the change in his friend's expression. What's going on? Jack asked, his voice filled with concern. Sam didn't answer right away. He stood there for a moment, staring at the envelope as if trying to understand what was happening. Finally, he opened it and unfolded the paper inside. As he read, his face slowly changed from confusion to shock, and then to disbelief. Sam? Jack asked, his voice laced with worry. Sam turned to him, the letter in his hand, his voice trembling. It's from the lawyer, the one who handled my wife's estate. Apparently, there's something I never knew about. Jack stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Sam's voice was barely above a whisper. It's about a piece of land. Land I didn't know existed. My wife's family, they left it to me. It's worth a lot. Jack was speechless for a moment, trying to process what Sam was saying. So, this land, this is something you've inherited? Sam nodded slowly. I guess I never really thought about it. I thought I had nothing left. But now, he trailed off, unsure of what to say next. Now you've got something else to build, Jack said, his voice firm. Sam looked at him, his expression a mix of disbelief and wonder. I don't know what to do with it, he admitted. Jack smiled. You'll figure it out, just like you've figured everything else out. And whatever you decide, you know I've got your back. Sam nodded, his heart full. He had spent so long feeling like he was carrying the weight of the world on his own. But now, standing here with Jack, he realized that he wasn't alone anymore. He had a future ahead of him, full of possibilities he never thought he would have again. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. Whatever came next, he was ready for it. The months that followed Sam's discovery of the inherited land were full of new opportunities and challenges. The news had shaken him, but in a way that made him feel lighter, like a heavy burden had been lifted. For the first time in years, he saw a future that wasn't defined by loss, but by the possibility of growth and renewal. Jack had stood by him, as always, offering his support and encouragement. Together, they had visited the land, an untouched parcel on the outskirts of town, rich with potential. The land wasn't far from the cabin, nestled in a quiet valley with a small stream running through it, surrounded by dense woods and rolling hills. It was beautiful, serene, and most importantly, it was theirs. It wasn't the grand fortune that some people might have expected, but for Sam, It felt like the answer to a prayer he hadn't known he had. The possibilities were endless. The two men spent countless hours walking the land, discussing what they could do with it. The idea of expanding their farm stand into something larger was appealing, but it wasn't just about business. This land had been given to Sam, and it felt right that it should be a place that reflected his journey, one of healing, renewal, and second chances. As the spring sun rose higher in the sky, Jack and Sam began working on the land, preparing it for the future they were about to build. They cleared the trees in certain areas, planted fruit trees, and started digging irrigation channels for the small crops they planned to grow. It was hard work, but it felt good. Every day, they saw more and more of their vision taking shape. The land began to feel like a part of them, just as the cabin had. It wasn't just about building something physical. It was about building a life that was filled with purpose and hope. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Jack and Sam stood together at the edge of the land, looking out at the future they were creating. Max lay at their feet, tired but content after a long day of work. Sam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was to come. "You ever think we might have actually done it?" Sam asked, his voice filled with awe. Jack turned to him, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Done what?" Sam gestured to the land around them. This life. We built it. And now it's ours." Jack's smile grew wider as he looked out at the land, then back at Sam. "Yeah, I think we did. And it feels pretty damn good, doesn't it?" Sam nodded, his eyes bright. "It does. I never thought it was possible. I never thought I'd have anything like this again." Jack clapped him on the shoulder, the bond between them stronger than ever. "You've earned every bit of it, Sam. You've worked harder than anyone I know, and I'm proud of what we've done here." Sam's gaze softened, and for a moment, he was quiet, as if lost in his thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about my family lately," he said, his voice quieter now. "About the life we had, and I realized something. I'm not forgetting them. I'm honoring them. I'm honoring their memory by living, by moving forward." Jack's heart swelled with pride for his friend. "That's exactly what they would have wanted for you, Sam. They would have wanted you to live, to find happiness again." Sam smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "I think so too. I've finally found peace with it all." Jack's throat tightened. "And you've got a place here. You've got a family in this cabin, in this land, and in me." Sam looked at him, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll never forget that, Jack. You gave me a second chance, and I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for it." The two men stood together for a long moment, taking in the view, the land, and the life they had built. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, still work to be done, but it was theirs, and it was real. As the months passed, the farm began to thrive. The fruit trees Sam had planted bore their first crop, and the vegetable garden flourished. They expanded their offerings at the farm stand, selling fresh produce, honey, and homemade preserves. The community embraced them, supporting their efforts and becoming part of the story they were writing. It wasn't just a business anymore. It was a place of connection, a place where people came not just for food but for the sense of belonging that Jack and Sam had created. Over time, the small farm stand grew into something bigger, just as their lives had. They added a small barn for livestock, and Sam began teaching the local kids how to garden, sharing the lessons he had learned in his journey of healing. Every day, they added to the life they had built, brick by brick, seed by seed. And every night, as they sat around the fire, watching the flames dance, they knew they had created something that was truly theirs. Sam had found a way to honor the past, to carry it with him without letting it define him. Jack had found peace, not just in the work they did, but in the friendship they shared. Together, they had built more than a cabin, more than a farm. They had built a life. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Their journey wasn't over. It had only just begun.